Today on the Matt Walsh Show, anti-American protesters in D.C. yesterday tore down an American flag, burned it, and hoisted a foreign flag in its place. It was one of the most disgraceful and infuriating displays we've ever witnessed, and it shows where the real dividing line in America is. Also, Joe Biden finally explains why he dropped out of the race, and he explained it by not explaining it at all. The White House press secretary does an even worse job of trying to explain why Biden is still fit to be president if he isn't fit to run for president. And in keeping with one of the themes of this week, the Wall Street Journal publishes a report attempting to explain why so many people are choosing not to have kids. Talk about all that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. Going online without ExpressVPN, it's like checking your bag at the airport without a lock. Who knows how many people are opening your bag and going through your private stuff. First, because of all your online traffic flows through their servers, internet service providers, including mobile network providers, know every single website you visit. And in the U.S., these providers are legally allowed to sell that information to advertisers who use it to target you with advertisements. But ExpressVPN reroutes 100% of your traffic through secure encrypted servers, so your ISP can't see your browsing history. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making it extremely difficult for third parties to track your online activity. Sounds complicated, but ExpressVPN is actually really easy to use. Just fire up the app and click one button to get protected. I love ExpressVPN because it works on all my family's devices, phones, laptops, tablets, and more. I use it whenever I'm browsing the internet because I really don't care to have all these third parties knowing what I'm searching for, websites I visit, videos I watch. It's none of their business, and I'm certainly not going to let them profit off of my vulnerability. Protect your online privacy today by visiting expressvpn.com/Walsh. That's expressvpn.com/Walsh. You get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/Walsh. Yesterday, as Kamala Harris addressed a black sorority in Indianapolis and Joe Biden prepared for his farewell ice cream party at the White House, left-wing rioters took down the American flags flying at one of Washington, D.C.'s most iconic landmarks, Union Station. Less than a mile from the Capitol complex, they raised Palestinian flags in their place. Various members of the mob also waved the flags of terrorist groups. And then, for good measure, they set the American flags on fire while chanting Allah Akbar. They also violently dragged a hapless police officer on the ground. Then the mob spray painted a threat on a Columbus monument. Hamas is coming, they wrote. In other words, this isn't the last of the terrorism that you'll see. This is only the beginning, they're saying. Now, anyone who claims to be America first should be filled with blind, visceral rage watching what happened yesterday in Washington. And for that matter, anyone who cares even remotely about the future of this country should be enraged. And that explains why neither Biden nor Harris for at least a day after it happened, said a word about it. It was as if none of it happened. But the footage was all over social media. Here's what it looked like.
So it's been incredibly diverse here, and this is pretty much the most intense we've seen. And it's unclear. Oh, and right now there's stun grenades being put out or some sort of sound bombs, and they're raising the Palestinian flag at that flagpole, and you are hearing what appear to be stun grenades or firecrackers going off just on the other side. There are a number of Palestinian flags being raised over there, and the crowd you can hear is cheering very loudly right now. Looks like police are still trying to gain control.
Now, a country run by competent leaders would use physical force, up to and including lethal force if necessary, to protect its flag and its monuments from this sort of barbarism. If we allow this to happen, and we just did, then we don't have a country anymore. We have anarchy. It's the end result of everything the left has been teaching in universities for the past several decades. It's the result of years of unchecked foreign migration, much of it illegal. And it's here now. Already, we should know the names of every single one of these rioters, as well as where they came from. How many of them are citizens? How many of them work for NGOs that we're funding with our tax dollars? These are questions that we'd have the answers to if our leaders cared about national self-preservation in the slightest, which they don't. And to be clear, this was not simply a political protest about Israel. Several of the rioters also carried Hamas and ISIS flags. This was a pro-terrorist rally and an explicitly anti-American rally, which is why they're burning the American flag, in the nation's capital. For all the consternation we heard about Charlottesville and the many hoaxes that rally spawned, it's remarkable yet completely expected. We will not hear a word about any of this in the mainstream press. None of the people who claim to care about political violence on the left actually really care about it. They endorse it. Needless to say, if a pride flag was torn down and burned and replaced by some other flag, imagine a mob of conservative white people tearing down a pride flag, burning it, and then hoisting, let's say, a Confederate flag in its place. It'd be the lead story on every news broadcast for the next 6 weeks. This should all repulse every single person in this country. And I say that regardless of your position on the issue that supposedly spawned this riot. It doesn't matter if you don't think Israel's prime minister should be speaking in Congress, or if you oppose America's funding of Israel, or whatever. A true patriot does not take sides with these kinds of people, no matter what. You lose the right to be taken seriously or listened to when you behave this way. I can say for myself, I automatically oppose you and everything you stand for when you burn my nation's flag and you try to replace my nation's flag with some foreign flag. I will never be a friend of yours or an ally to your cause when you do that. Okay, any hope of that is gone. I don't care who you are or what your gripe is. And I say that as someone who does not like the idea of a foreign leader speaking to Congress and telling us why we should give his country more money. I didn't like it when Zelensky did it. I didn't like it with Netanyahu. But that doesn't excuse the mob violence in Washington. It doesn't make me any kind of compatriot with scumbags who desecrate my flag and hate my country. It also doesn't excuse the total failure of the police to prevent any of this from happening. Now, if you spent any amount of time looking at footage from January 6th, one of the first things you notice is that the police actually responded to varying degrees. And of course, in the years, especially that followed January 6th, the police response was overwhelming. Elderly women with cancer were hunted down and hit with trespassing charges. The FBI scrutinized every second of video from that day to find more suspects. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, for their part, issued dire statements about how democracy was hanging in the balance. They're still issuing statements about it. Now, contrast that with what happened yesterday in the nation's capital. Nobody stopped the mob from damaging federal property or raising these flags. Some officers did attempt to engage the crowd at various points, and the rioters responded by dragging them around like rag dolls. Watch. Now, remember all the breathless news reports after January 6th about how officers were supposedly attacked in the Capitol? There's not going to be any coverage of what happened to this officer. There will be no teary-eyed testimony from this police officer leading MSNBC every night for the next month. Adam Kinzinger isn't going to go on TV and weep over it. There won't be any dragnet, no 10-year prison sentences. They don't care about this cop because he was assaulted by a mob that they support. Of course, precisely no one is surprised by the media's hypocrisy anymore. By this point, we're used to the fact that the left gets a free pass to commit political violence. They injured dozens of Secret Service agents and torched a church right outside the White House when Trump was president. The left's response was to mock Trump for having to take cover in the White House bunker when that was happening. The whole summer of 2020 was like that. Businesses all over the country were razed. as Democrats like Kamala cheered on the mobsters. But what happened yesterday marks a major escalation in what Democrats are willing to tolerate in this country. They're willing to tolerate foreign invaders raising a foreign flag in our capital. I mean, that is now beyond dispute. It's on tape. Kamala Harris didn't condemn the mobsters at Union Station yesterday because she knows they're her voters. She doesn't mind it when they deface monuments with terroristic threats. She doesn't mind it when they drag parked police officers on the ground. Now, she did finally put out a brief statement today condemning what happened yesterday. It took her 24 hours, and she was quite tepid about it, but she reluctantly put the statement out because she has no choice. She knows that she has to. It's just not, you cannot get elected yet in this country when you openly support people who burn the American flag and replace it with a foreign flag. But still, even with the tepid statement, Kamala is the exact same woman she was in 2020 when she was bailing out BLM rioters who went on to murder people. Only now, more than ever, it's clear that she doesn't care about the alleged justification for the riots. Whether they're pro-BLM or pro-Hamas, doesn't matter. All she cares about is that the rioters are destroying this country in the literal sense. Again, I mean, if these rioters had left tire marks on a LGBT flag painted on the street or put their feet on Nancy Pelosi's desk, there'd be a nationwide manhunt to find out who they are and destroy their lives forever. But because they desecrated America's flag and America's monuments, they're basically untouchable. I can't emphasize enough that dozens of crimes were committed yesterday in broad daylight. And we know the FBI won't do anything about it. Remember that federal law that got attention under the Trump administration, which makes it illegal to deface certain monuments? That's not going to be enforced here. Neither will the laws against trespassing and obstruction that were used to throw January 6th defendants into solitary confinement for months on end. Burning things in the middle of the city is also illegal. There are multiple laws that are supposed to prevent you from burning anything in the middle of a city street, least of all a piece of property that you ripped down. So this is not a free speech. People have the right to burn the flag. This is not their flag. This was government property. And you're burning something in the middle. I mean, if you went down on a street corner and burned a cardboard box, you would at least get a citation because open burning is illegal in the city without a permit. There are many laws that could be enforced here. Totally valid laws. But those laws were not enforced because the powers that be endorse this kind of political violence. And the people who committed the vandalism seem to understand that because they made no effort to hide their identities. The FBI could find them in a day if they wanted to. This is what the Christopher Columbus Memorial Fountain and the Freedom Bell looked like yesterday afternoon. Notice how completely unafraid the rioters are. Watch. No one's trying to stop them. No one will ever try to find them and arrest them, even though they're not even covering their faces. There'll be no investigation into how this mob was transported to Washington, D.C., even though we have footage of buses dropping them off to do all of this. Watch. So you see the buses there. It's a pretty obvious question to ask here. Who's paying for those buses? Is it the same billionaires and NGOs who funded those takeovers of college campuses a few weeks ago? The ones where leftists occupied buildings and destroyed property while camping out in matching tents? If so, it wouldn't be difficult to put RICO charges together and dismantle all the funding that allows these acts of domestic terrorism to take place. At the very least, the DOJ could put together 10-year prison sentences for the instigators. If they did it for January 6th, they can do it here. But again, they don't do that because they want it to happen. Go and check the press pages and social media accounts of members of Congress and the White House. If you do that, you won't see condemnations of terrorist flags flying in the Capitol. Instead, you'll find juvenile screeds about Israel's prime minister. For example, this is what Nancy Pelosi, still the de facto leader of the Democrats in the House, decided to tweet out yesterday as America's flag was being torched a few blocks away. Quote, Benjamin Netanyahu's presentation in the House chamber today was by far the worst presentation of any foreign dignitary invited and honored with the privilege of addressing the Congress of the United States. And nothing in her statement about her own voting base, tearing down an American flag, burning it, and hoisting a foreign flag in its place. Contrast that tweet with what Donald Trump was saying via video on January 6th. He repeatedly called for peace. He told his supporters to go home, that violence and destroying government property wasn't the answer. And for that, Biden's DOJ charged Trump with a series of crimes. Twitter kicked him off the platform, so did Facebook. Just 3.5 years later, Democrats aren't simply failing to condemn the violence of their foot soldiers, they're encouraging it. Now, to be fair, I did come across one example of a Democrat who, after a few hours, appeared to be mildly concerned about the pro-terrorist demonstration at Union Square. And it was about as comical a response as you'd expect. As the Israeli Prime Minister spoke, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut wrote on Twitter, quote, "The suggestion that any American who objects to the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza is a Hamas sympathizer was way out of bounds." So he's criticizing Netanyahu for daring to suggest that his critics actually sympathize with terrorists. But just a few hours later, as the footage of rioters flying Hamas flags circulated on social media, Murphy tweeted this little update, quote, "I've seen some disturbing images coming out of today's protests at the Capitol. I'll always support Americans exercising their First Amendment rights, but pro-Hamas cheers and messages of hate and anti-Semitism have no place in our country, period." Life comes at you fast, as the kids say. Of course, Chris Murphy didn't retract his original post or issue any kind of apology. He's not going to engage in any kind of introspection as to why swarms of Hamas sympathizers just vandalized the nation's capital and attacked a police officer or look into who funded them. He also doesn't say anything to actually condemn the anti-American nature of this quote-unquote protest. The best Democrats could do is some half-hearted finger wag at the rioters who went a little bit too far, who made things a little too obvious. Now, to their credit, House Republicans were vocal throughout the day about what was happening, and they made sure that the flags at Union Station were put back up last night. Watch.
Nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Woo! Yeah!
Now, more than any other series of videos you can find, the clips I've played today very clearly illustrate the contrast between the two political parties in this country. And it's not that one party is perfect or anything even close to perfect. It's that one party, the other party, openly wants to destroy the country we're living in, and the other party doesn't. Even if they have often proven themselves ineffective at preventing it from being destroyed, there's one party that actively wants to destroy it, and that is the distinction. We're not even arguing about policy at this point. We're talking about supporting the destruction of the country or opposing it. This is the litmus test. When you see images of these scumbags tearing down and burning an American flag, does it fill you with righteous fury or not? Do you oppose them and everything they stand for or not? Do you want to preserve this country or tear it down? You know, I wish that the political lines were more nuanced and less severe than that. I wish there were finer distinctions. I wish we could afford to pick our teams based on questions less fundamental than should America continue to exist? But we can't. And this is where we are right now. One side of the political aisle truly wants to destroy this country. It's what they desire. It's what they're openly working towards. Now, of course, as always, the corporate press is on the side of the enemies of civilization. Last night, Politico ran this headline, which really belongs in a museum or something. Quote, "Republicans pounce after Netanyahu protesters burn U.S. flags and wave Hamas ones instead." The old Republicans pounce routine. In other words, the real problem here is not that left-wing terrorists attack police officers and put up a terrorist flag while burning our own. The real problem and the real story is that Republicans noticed what was happening. Republicans pounced. Now, if Kamala Harris takes control of the White House, we'll be seeing a lot more flag burning to the tune of Allah Akbar. There will be more political violence by thugs who worship foreign flags. And in response at every turn, Republicans will be portrayed as the problem for pouncing. More than ever, it's clear that the Democrat platform is to replace this country's voters and indoctrinate foot soldiers who are willing to use violence to enforce the party's ideology. That's why Union Square looked like Gaza yesterday. That's why a foreign flag flew in the Capitol. And it's what the whole country will look like if the current party in power stays there. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. Man, have you heard of Rose Sparks? This dual-action prescription merges the powerhouse ingredients found in generic Viagra and Cialis, sildenafil and tadalafil into one formidable treatment. But it's not merely about the ingredients in the medication. It's how you're taking it. That's why roast sparks are designed to dissolve under your tongue. That's huge because dissolvable treatment hits your bloodstream faster than old school pills. Roast Sparks keeps you present with your partner instead of waiting for a pill to work. Roast Sparks leverages the benefits of sublingual administration, meaning the tablet dissolves under your tongue. This method allows for fast absorption directly into the bloodstream, bypassing the digestive system. The result, quicker onset of action, reducing the wait time typically associated with traditional pills. Plus, tadalafil, the active ingredient in Cialis, lasts in the system for up to 36 hours. So when the mood is right, you'll be ready without another dose. For treatment that works fast and lasts long, connect with a provider at ro.co/Walsh to find out if Roast Sparks are right for you. ro.co/Walsh. Again, that's ro.co/Walsh. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Only available if prescribed after an online consultation with a provider. There's one other piece of footage from what I think was the protest yesterday. This is circulating online. It's either this protest or another recent one, but this appears to be some of the protesters doing a little cosplay theater routine where they're acting out a scenario where I guess an IDF soldier executes some Palestinian POWs. And of course, they've stripped down to their underwear to do this because they'll take any opportunity to do that. But let's watch this little fun theatrical performance.
Your entire family is gonna be wiped off the registry! You don't have any friends left, you terrorist! You like that? You like watching your husband and brother die? That's why you're born, you disgusting women! How dare you document this? You! Yeah, I'm gonna come after your family! Last one! Israel is our
You know, I'm disappointed, first of all, that not a very committed performance by, well, the person playing the Israeli soldier there carrying out the executions. That person, not a great performance. Certainly not what we would call a nuanced portrayal, but committed, enthusiastic performance. But the other ones, I was quite disappointed in. I mean, they're killed and they just lightly fall to the ground. That's not, you know, I've never been tied up and executed before, but I'm pretty sure that if that were to happen, it's just like a quick drop to the ground. You got to be committed to it. It might hurt a little bit. You got to be willing to, you know, get a little bruise on your elbows or whatever. But so not a very committed performance from them. And it's pretty obvious that those guys just, because look, this is a left-wing protest and they're all a bunch of perverse fetishists as always. So this is some sort of fetish thing. They're in their underwear. It's a humiliation fetish. And that's what it's really about for them. But when you watch that, you see that, you know, these leftist radicals, they prove themselves again and again to be really the worst of all worlds, right? Because they're these barbaric people who you know burn flags and they're rioting and they're doing all this kind of stuff. And then at the same time, so they've got that, but at the same time they're also huge dorks. And it's a combination we're used to these days, but it's really kind of it's a unique combination. Because usually it's kind of one or the other. But they've got both going. So you end up with this weird combination of cringy loser thugs. And normally, like, if you're a cringy loser, at least you're not a thug. And if you're a thug, at least you're not a cringy loser. But these people are all of those things combined. They just take it's like a vast array of bad people, and they take the worst qualities of all the worst people, and they exemplify it. And it should be really easy to, when you see stuff like that, when you see that, and then you see the flag burning, and you can look at that, and you can immediately, even if you don't know what they're upset about, you don't know anything about the issue that they're ostensibly protesting over, you should be able to look at that and say, well, I don't know exactly, maybe if I don't know what the issue is, I don't know whose side I'm on, but I'm definitely not on their side. Like, whatever they're upset, I'm not on their side. I know that. That should be a pretty easy call to make. Joe Biden last night finally addressed the nation to explain why he was dropping out of the race, except that he didn't explain it. There was one reason, supposedly, for this address, which was to let the nation know why the sitting president, who was running for re-election, is suddenly not anymore. Except that didn't happen. That reason was never fulfilled. He never explained it. Here's a little bit of what he did say. Let's watch.
I revere this office, but I love my country more. It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. But in the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think it's more important than any title. I draw strength and I find joy in working for the American people. But this sacred task of perfecting our union is not about me, it's about you. In this moment, we can see those we disagree with not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. Can we do that? Does character in public life still matter? And the truth, the sacred cause of this country is larger than any one of us. And those of us who cherish that cause, cherish it so much, a cause of American democracy itself, must unite to protect it. You know, in recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
Okay, so he says he wants to save democracy and he's passing the torch. He mumbles and stumbles through the address, which is only 11 minutes. I didn't even play the worst parts of it. He can barely get through this thing. It really is. I mean, what else can we say about the fact that the guy is mentally not with it? He's fully, at this point, succumbed to senility. And I think well established. I mean, it's why he's not running for president anymore. He's not even looking into the camera, you know. He's staring off into the distance somewhere else. It's a mess. But always remember, this is the guy that the Democrats would have and wanted to prop up and push into a second term if they could possibly get away with it, but they couldn't. It's just really, really bad. And meanwhile, there are, of course, some conspiracy theories on the right that I've seen on Twitter saying that this is that address was AI or a body double. You know, Biden is really already dead is the conspiracy theory, and this is not even him. But I think I addressed this already. It just doesn't. You have to understand how little sense that makes, right? Because if Biden was actually physically incapacitated or no longer with us on planet Earth, that would be an enormous benefit to the Democrats, because then all suggestion that they committed some sort of coup would be out the window, because then you couldn't call it a coup. I mean, if the guy actually is physically incapacitated or dead, then he can't run for president, obviously. So that would legitimize the coup, allows them to install Kamala Harris as president without her being elected, which would be a huge political benefit to her. So there's no reason why they would hide that. It doesn't benefit them to hide it. And also, I think it's funny, the suggestion that they went out and they did AI or they did a body double, but the fake version of Biden is even more mumbly and incoherent than the real Biden. I mean, what's the point of that? So I think we can be sure that it really is Biden, but the real problem is that he doesn't explain why he wants to pass the torch or what made him decide to pass it when just a week ago he was insisting that he's the only one who can save democracy. A week ago, and every point up until that moment, he was the only one who could do it. And now he's passing the torch and he doesn't tell us why. He's decided a new generation must save us. So he doesn't level with us or tell us what's really going on, even while he claims that he always levels with us. We know that he doesn't. He also claims that he's putting aside personal ambition in defense of democracy, even though his personal ambition was keeping him in the race until he literally had no choice but to leave. He's been abandoned by everyone. Everyone's come out against him. He lost all of his campaign funding. So he has no friends, no allies, no one taking his side, no money. So he had to leave. And only then did he drop out. So that's what's funny about this. Biden, he's presenting himself now, and the media, of course, is amplifying this narrative that Biden is an example of someone putting aside their personal ambition and putting the country first. But it's the opposite. He's an example of what happens when personal ambition is your only guiding principle, the only thing that matters to you. That's the story here. That's the great tragedy that is Joe Biden. And the end of his career is tragic. I don't feel sorry for him. It's all self-induced. He did this to himself. I don't feel sorry for him. I have no pity on him. I don't. But it is a tragic story that he was driven by this solely by a desire for personal advancement. He did whatever he had to do his whole career with this one thing always in mind, that power for himself. And he finally gets there. You know, he drags himself, or he is rather dragged to that place that he has pursued for 50 years. And he gets there, and it ends in total disgrace and humiliation. Speaking of disgrace and humiliation, Karine Jean-Pierre finally reemerged yesterday. And I want you to watch this exchange between her and a reporter. Listen.
The president believes that it's best for the country that he not be in the Oval Office for another 4 years. How can you assure the American people that he's up to be in the office for the next 6 months?
Well, first I would say is that, and I've heard these suggestions out there. This is not an answer to you. This is an answer to the suggestions that I've heard about him resigning from office. We believe, and any suggestion of that note is ridiculous. It is not what we believe. The president, I just laid out what the president has been able to do in almost 4 years, and it's been successful. He's been able to do more, again, than any president has been able to do in 2 terms. He's been able to do that more in 1 term. And he wants to finish the job that he started and delivering more historic results for the American people. And look, he didn't step down from campaigning or from running because he didn't believe he can serve in a 2nd term. That is not why. And what I would say, as I just finished my opening, I would say tune into what he has to say tonight, and he will lay that out for you all and the American people as to why he made that decision.
Yeah, tune in tonight. He'll lay it out. And then he did not lay it out at all. All he had was a cliche. Oh, I'm passing the torch. Okay, why? We know you're passing the torch. Why are you doing that, though? What exactly made you decide to do that when you weren't going to do that a week ago? It would be easier to swallow the total lack of explanation if for a period of time he had been, up to this moment, he had been publicly acknowledging at least the possibility that he might drop out of the race. But there was no possibility. It was. Remember, it's only a couple weeks ago that he said only God himself would have to come down from heaven and tell him to drop out. So did that happen? Did God speak to you and tell you? Is that what happened? So we start with a good question. If he can't run for president, then how can he be president? The answer was complete garbled gibberish, which, you know, Well, let me just quote. Here's Karine Jean-Pierre. Can I just quote? Here's what she said. Well, first I would say is that, and I've heard these suggestions out there. This is not an answer to you. This is an answer to the suggestions that I've heard about him resigning from office. We believe, and any suggestion of that note is ridiculous. It is not what we believe. The president, I just laid out what the president has been able to do in almost 4 years, and it's been successful. Okay, well, thanks then. You know, that would have been a great answer to the question if the question was, hey, Jean-Pierre, can you say a whole bunch of words that don't mean anything? If that was the question, the answer was fantastic. It was a great answer to that question, but that was not, unfortunately, the question. And, you know, I do almost feel pity on the White House press secretaries in situations like this. I mean, I don't get quite to the level of pity, but almost. When you realize they're in a spot where, yeah, the answer is, it's just gibberish. It doesn't mean anything, but she cannot give a good answer because, like, the real answer is, yeah, look, guys, the president's senile. I mean, it's a bad situation. You know, yeah, he should not be president anymore. He should have been president this whole time, but he is. And so we're just going to finish this thing out. Look, we could strong arm him into dropping out of the race, but we can't strong arm him into not being president. That's why he's still president. Because the freaking old guy just won't, because he insists. Like, that's the actual answer, but she's not going to say that. I wish she would, but she's not going to say that. So we're left with this. Trump had a rally in North Carolina yesterday, and there's one thing that came up in this rally that I want to talk about. Let's play the clip first.
So now we have a new victim to defeat. Lion Kamala Harris. Lion, L-Y-I-N apostrophe. The most incompetent and far-left vice president in American history. By the way, they did a poll. She was rated the worst vice president in history. I've never seen that poll before, but that's the poll.
So this is big news. Trump debuted his new nickname for Kamala, and I got to say, not feeling it. Kind of mid, as the kids would say. It's a bit mid. It's a mid nickname. Not Trump's best work. I think he could do better. Lion Kamala. Doesn't really flow, doesn't roll off the tongue. Now, you could argue there's a double meaning there, which is kind of funny, that Kamala has done a lot of lying to get ahead. You know, she's been in all kinds of positions. One could assume some of them lying, but I don't even think that he intends it that way. So I think it's just lying, like she's telling lies. Also, lying isn't the most defining thing about her. I mean, yeah, she lies, but saying that a politician lies is redundant. It's generic. It's not even that compelling to the voter because, you know, when you tell someone who doesn't know much about a politician and you try to explain why this politician is bad, and they say, well, why are they bad? And you say, oh, well, she lies. And most voters say, oh, yeah, well, they all do. Every politician lies. So really? So who cares? And also, Trump has used lying for like 10 other people. And I'll say this too, that if this has not already happened on TikTok, it will. Someone's going to take that and say, yeah, she's lying Kamala. You're darn right. And then it's going to be, you know, like Lion. She's a lion, a lioness. There's going to be some kind of thing like that. I guarantee they're going to try to. Should be super corny, but that's what they're going to do. So I've been trying to workshop some other options. I put out a poll on Twitter. I'm taking this very seriously. This will be my one great contribution to the Trump campaign. Come up with a better nickname. I'll make sure they see it. Probably won't matter, but I'll make sure they see it at least. I know Trump doesn't often use alliteration with his nicknames, but I think a name like Kamala really lends itself to it. I think he should be using alliteration more than he does, especially when there are so many K sounds that fit with her. So many possibilities. Corrupt Kamala, commie Kamala, cackling Kamala. Someone suggested Kumala, like C-O-U-P, Mala. Scamala is something that we've made use of here at the Daily Wire. So right now in my poll with nearly 50,000 votes counted, cackling Kamala and Scamala are in the lead. And there are possibilities with the name Harris too. One suggestion I had was harebrained Harris. It's a little old school, you know. It's like a nickname that a school bully in 1937 might use. But Trump hasn't shied away from that. With Nikki Haley, he called her bird brain. Right? Wasn't that Nikki Haley was bird brain? So this is very much in that vein. But I think, you know, I think corrupt Kamala and commie Kamala are both really good. Cackle and Kamala, I think I kind of lean towards that. And it's not because the fact that she cackles is the most important thing about her. That's not the best argument against her that you could make, but it's kind of visceral. It has a visceral feel to it. It flows, it works. And cackling it brings to mind other things besides just having an annoying laugh. It just kind of, there's an image that comes with it that I think sort of works. And so that would be my suggestion. But I'll wait for the poll there's a few more hours on the poll. I'll wait for those results. And we'll see. It kind of, there's some people have said, well, forget about the nickname thing. This is too serious for that. Let's get down to business. We don't need to do nicknames this time. I can see an argument for that, but Trump is doing the nickname thing. So if you're going to do it, I think you need to make it stick. And of course, this election won't be decided by a nickname, I realize. And I've been saying for days now, warning that the threat posed by a Harris candidacy is serious and should be taken seriously. What will happen? How is this going to shake out? I don't know. I can't predict. I'm incredibly bad at making political predictions. I've proven that time and time again, which is kind of strange because I think I'm pretty good at making cultural predictions. So I can predict with pretty good accuracy where the culture is headed. I think I've also proven that over the years. I can tell you what's next on the great metaphorical slippery slope. And I'm usually vindicated. But with politics, my crystal ball is very defective. And for example, I was confidently predicting last week that efforts to replace Biden would go away after the Trump assassination attempt. And boy, was I wrong about that. But I thought the Democrats would just chalk this election up to a hopeless cause and let Biden, strategically let Biden take the fall. Because if somebody's going to lose to Trump, they'd rather it be some old guy who's not going to be with us much longer. Let him absorb all of that and then regroup for 2028. I thought that's the strategy they would take. I was wrong. Maybe they're still chalking it up to a hopeless cause anyway, and they're letting Harris take the fall in order to clear her out as an option for 2028 so they can move on. I don't know. Maybe she goes on to win. Maybe they think she really can win. There's an argument when you look at the electoral map that the Democrats are headed for a wipeout, at least at the top of the ballot. And I could see that. I could see Kamala falling flat on her face. There's also an argument that she mobilizes the Democrat base, she drives the female vote, energizes voters who are sick of, prior to Biden dropping out, there was a majority of voters who said that they want different options. And so there are some voters out there who are just sick of the same old and want something new. You can't underestimate the American desire to move on from things that have lost their novelty and find something new. Not even necessarily because it's better, but just because it's different. Now, Kamala actually is not different. She's been a politician her whole career. She's also almost 60. This is kind of how sad it is that we're so used to the gerontocracy that someone who's 60 years old is now the youth. This is a youth movement with someone who's 60, okay? But even so, in comparison, she's younger and they can try to make her into more of a novelty act. Is that enough to get her over the hump, if you'll pardon the expression, where she's concerned? I don't know. That from now on, that is going to be my political prediction going forward. I don't know. I just don't know. What I do know is that we should at least take it seriously, and you have to vote. Are you still struggling with back taxes or unfiled returns? The IRS is escalating collections by adding 20,000 new agents and sending millions of demand letters. Handling this alone can be a huge mistake and cost you thousands of dollars. In these challenging times, your best offense is with Tax Network USA. With over 14 years of experience, the experts at Tax Network USA have saved clients millions in back taxes. Regardless of the size of your tax issue, their expertise is your advantage. Tax Network USA offers 3 key services: protection, compliance, and settlement. Upon signing up, Tax Network USA will immediately contact the IRS to secure a protection order, ensuring that aggressive collection activities such as garnishments, levies, or property seizures are halted. If you haven't filed in a while, need amended returns, or are missing records, Tax Network USA expert tax preparers will update all of your filings to eliminate the risk of IRS enforcement. Then they'll create a settlement strategy to reduce or eliminate your tax debt. The IRS is the largest collection agency in the world, and now the tax season is over. Collection season has begun. Tax Network USA can help even with state tax issues. For a complimentary consultation, call today at 1-800-958-1000 or visit their website at tnusa.com/Walsh. That's 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Walsh today. Don't let the IRS take advantage of you. Get the help you need with Tax Network USA. Jeremy's Razors is celebrating Christmas in July. Right now, get the 2nd-gen Precision 5 razor for 25% off. The Precision 5 has been radically redesigned, featuring sharper blades that last longer. Plus, it also features a precision trimmer for achieving sharp, clean edges. Once again, 25% off our Christmas in July celebration. Go to jeremy'srazors.com to get your Precision 5 razor and get an exceptionally smooth and close shave today. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. Today for our daily cancellation, we have something of a sequel to yesterday's cancellation. Yesterday we talked about how Kamala Harris, if elected, God forbid, would be the first president in over a century to be childless. I explained why that would be a bad thing for the country. There are a lot of reasons to oppose her presidency. The fact that she prioritized personal ambition over having a family is not the only reason or even the main reason, but it is a reason. Now I want to expand the conversation beyond Kamala Harris. It just so happens that, and this is unrelated to Kamala Harris, but the Wall Street Journal this week published a lengthy article about our societal shift away from parenting and family life, titled "Why Americans Aren't Having Babies." And here's some of the article. Quote, "Americans aren't just waiting longer to have kids and having fewer once they start. They're less likely to have any at all. Women without children, rather than those having fewer, are responsible for most of the decline in average births among 35 to 44-year-olds during their lifetime so far, according to an analysis of the Census Bureau's current population survey data by University of Texas demographer Dean Spears for the Wall Street Journal. Childlessness accounted for over 2/3 of the 6.5% drop in average births between 2012 and 2022. While more people are becoming parents later in life, 80% of the babies born in 2022 are to women under 35, according to CDC National Vital Statistics data. Quote, "Some may still have children, but whether it will be enough to compensate for the delays that are driving down fertility overall seems unlikely," says Karen Benjamin Guzzo, director of the Carolina Population Center at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. The change is far-reaching. More women in 35 to 44 age range across all races, income levels, employment statuses, regions, and broad education groups aren't having children. So here we've established much of what we already knew. This is a real trend, a rising trend of people not just having fewer kids, but choosing not to have any kids at all. What's interesting is the why. And this article takes a stab at that question, as so many in the past have. And I think it gets kind of surprisingly close to the answer. Quote, "As more women gained access to birth control and entered the workforce in the 1970s, reshaping family life and expectations around gender, Americans began having fewer kids. By 1980, the average number of children per family was 1.8, down from a high of 3.6 during the post-Depression baby boom, according to Gallup. Now researchers say having children at all has begun to feel optional. Quote, "To be a human being for most people meant to have children," says Anastasia Berg, co-author with Rachel Wiseman of the new book, "What Are Children For?" on ambivalence and choice. "You didn't think about how much it would cost. It was taken for granted," she says. But unlike their parents and grandparents, the author says, younger Americans view kids as one of the many elements that can create a meaningful life. Weighed against other personal and professional ambitions, the investments of child rearing don't always land in children's favor. And we also get several examples of childless couples offering their own sort of testimonials and explanations of why they've chosen to live this way. So here's just one, quote, "Beth Davis loves her niece and nephew, but she isn't envious of how much time and money her siblings spend bouncing between volleyball tournaments, baseball games, and trips to the mall to replace outgrown clothes. Davis, who works in marketing, and her husband, Jacob Edenfield, 41, both say they always expected to hit a moment when they too wanted to become parents. That still hadn't happened by the time they started dating in their mid-30s. They decided to start reorienting their lives. With a combined income of $280,000, the couple's able to put about $4,500 a month toward what they hope will be a mid-50s retirement. Another $2,600 pays rent on a sprawling Creole townhouse. The remaining $8,000 or so, much of which they assume would have been eaten up by child rearing, goes primarily toward enjoying their lives. The couple often dines at the city's upscale restaurants, regularly works out at a high-end wellness center, recently paid cash for a BMW. Edenfield meditates for an hour every morning and works on the novel he's writing at the local corner bar many nights. For companionship, the couple fosters a rotating cast of Bengal cats. Of course, the cats. Always with the cats. The rest of the personal examples given in this article are like this. Childless people decide to remain childless primarily so that they could spend more money on themselves, treat themselves to more luxuries, generally focus more on themselves. It's the same story we've always heard. What I appreciate about the article is that it illustrates a point I've tried to make many times, which is that all this stuff about how people aren't having kids because they can't afford it is, when it comes down to it, mostly nonsense. Now, sure, inflation is bad, the economy isn't in great shape, but you're still in a much better place financially than the vast majority of humans who've ever become parents. People have had kids with a lot less money and significantly fewer resources. There's just no question about that. So if you're one of these childless by choice types, there's no getting around the fact that literally billions of people poorer and worse off than you have had kids. And in light of that fact, it's hard to blame it on the economy or the expenses involved. I had kids when our total household income was $44,000 a year. We had twins, so it was a family of four on $44,000 a year. Now, we weren't impoverished by any means. This isn't a story of abject poverty, but we certainly weren't close to well off, and we had precisely $0 in savings. So when I hear someone who makes significantly more money than I made at the time and is older and has savings and is married to someone who also works and has savings, and this person says they can't afford to have kids, it makes no sense. I mean, if you can't afford it, how did I afford it with fewer resources and less money? Again, how did and how do the billions of people in much worse shape than either of us afford it, if you allegedly can't? The answer, as this article notes, is that it's not really about the money. It's about what you prioritize, what you think life is for. I mean, that is the thing. What is life for? In the past, people had kids not because they were living in so much luxury and comfort that they thought they could afford it, but because they believed that having kids is what adults are supposed to do. The question of whether they could afford it, it never even came up. It wasn't even a thing they talked about. It would have been nonsensical to even ask them that. If you had gone up to someone like this and said, well, can you afford to have kids? They would have looked at you like the question doesn't mean anything. Asking if they could afford to have children would have been like asking if they could afford to breathe air or bask in the warmth of the sun. Afford has nothing to do with it. You have children because this is what human existence is about. This is what you're supposed to do. If you're unable to have kids despite your best efforts, then that's a sign perhaps that God has called you to something else, and you should figure out what that thing is. But the idea of choosing to have no children, choosing to live a life focused only on your own comfort and enjoyment would have not even occurred to people in the past, and many people still living in the world today. Now, if you discard this way of living and thinking, as our culture has done, you're left with a question. It's a now very familiar question that we ask in so many other areas of life. You've discarded that thing that people have believed and have centered their life around forever. What do you replace it with? If not that, then what? If you reject the idea that you should have kids because that's what you're supposed to do, because it's one of the reasons you exist, it's what life is for. If you reject that conception of human existence, then what is your alternative conception? Now, we always get the same answer from these articles and stories about childless couples. For them, life is for eating nice dinners and going on vacations and buying expensive cars and other consumer goods. But what is that for? I mean, why does any of that matter? So you got a BMW, who cares? Like, why is that better than getting a car, a used car for $25,000? I mean, who cares? Why does one matter more than the other? Why do you find meaning in that? Why does it matter? Why should you find happiness in any of that? Where is the purpose in it? Where is the meaning? Like when you're lying in bed at night, you're thinking like, what is all this for? Or do you never think that? Do you live a life like a half sentient person who doesn't even contemplate any of this stuff? Is that the case? Well, who knows? But they have no answer to any of those questions. This is why the rise of childlessness really matters. We aren't judging people's lifestyle choices, quote unquote, because we want to be mean or whatever. It matters because, first of all, if too many people decide not to propagate the species, extinction follows, and avoiding extinction matters. If that doesn't matter, then nothing does. And second, even before the physical extinction of the human race, which is a rather important detail, we face a kind of philosophical extinction, the loss of meaning, the loss of any objective sense of purpose for human life, any idea of why we are here and what all of this is for. That's what hangs in the balance. That's why it matters. And the people who don't understand that, or pretend not to, are today canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day. Godspeed.
John Bickley here, Daily Wire Editor-in-Chief. Wake up every morning with our show, Morning Wire, where we bring you all the news that you need to know in 15 minutes or less. Join me and my co-host Georgia Howe for daily coverage of all the biggest stories on Morning Wire.